What would you do if someone asked you to give up your seat, just because they believed they were more important? One phone call, one name, and suddenly the entire system bows. On a high-profile business-class flight from Chicago to Dubai, a simply dressed black woman sat quietly in seat 1A, the most coveted window spot in the cabin. She wore no designer logos, carried no entourage, just a calm presence and a leather-bound notebook resting on her lap. Moments later, a sharply dressed flight attendant approached with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said politely, "but there might be a mistake. This seat was actually requested by one of our preferred passengers." The woman looked up, unfazed, then offered a subtle smile. She reached for her phone, typed a brief message, and sent it without saying a word. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. But what happened next would turn a routine flight into a lesson in power, perception, and the quiet strength that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Alana Brooks, 38, wasn't the type of woman who needed to announce her presence. She let the silence do it for her. As the founder and CEO of Nova Flight Holdings, a powerhouse investment firm that had recently acquired a controlling 70% stake in Skylux Air, the country's struggling national airline, she was known in elite business circles for her razor-sharp mind, ruthless precision, and above all, her ability to command a room without raising her voice. But no one on Flight 309 from Chicago to Dubai knew any of that. On this day, Alana wore a crisp white blouse, a soft brown silk scarf tied neatly at her collar, and carried a small vintage leather suitcase. No brand names screamed for attention, no assistant trailed behind. She boarded the plane alone and quietly took her seat in 1A, the most exclusive spot in the cabin. Around her, the hum of luxury was unmistakable, champagne being poured into crystal flutes, the scent of designer cologne lingering in the air, and the rustle of silk suits and Hermes handbags filling the business-class cabin. The other passengers were executives, heirs, and power couples, the kind of people used to being noticed, the kind of people who often mistook modesty for mediocrity. Alana had boarded this flight with a mission: to experience firsthand the service that, according to multiple reports, had become quietly discriminatory toward passengers of color, particularly those who didn't look the part of wealth. She had received one too many letters from high-value clients who felt disrespected or overlooked, and as someone who had built her empire on the belief that equity starts with access, she had decided it was time to see the truth for herself. Watching from the galley was Tessa Lang, the flight's purser. A seasoned crew member in her early 40s, Tessa had worked the business-class cabin for over a decade. She was known for her sharp efficiency, photogenic smile, and uncanny ability to remember the drink preferences of Skylux's Platinum Elite members. But beneath her polished surface was a quiet bias, one she had never been forced to confront. In her mind, luxury looked a certain way: tailored suits, pearl earrings, last names she recognized from glossy business magazines. And Alana Brooks, with her understated outfit and calm presence, simply didn't fit the mold. As Tessa observed her from afar, her mind began to turn. She had seen Charlotte Whitman, a frequent VIP passenger and socialite, board just moments earlier, and she knew Charlotte always sat in 1A. That meant something was off. As the plane prepared for departure, Tessa made a mental note to sort it out. After all, she'd done it before, reassigned a few seats here, made an adjustment there. The goal, as always, was to keep the VIPs comfortable. What she didn't know was that today's adjustment would come at a cost no one on board was prepared to pay. The confrontation began the way these moments always do. Not with a scream, but with a smile. Charlotte Whitman, 51, a long-time Platinum Plus member and frequent flyer whose name was etched into the Skylux system like royalty, stood over seat 1A with a practiced look of dismay. Her perfectly manicured fingers clutched the edge of the leather headrest as she leaned in toward Alana, voice low but unmistakably sharp. "I think there's been a mix-up," she said, flashing a tight, polite grin. "This is usually my seat. The airline knows. I fly this route every month." Charlotte was dressed in her usual high-profile uniform, pastel blazer, silk scarf knotted just so, and a designer tote large enough to hold entitlement by the gallon. She didn't yell, she didn't need to. The assumption was simple: someone like her belonged in 1A. Someone like Alana didn't. As if on cue, Tessa Lang appeared by Charlotte's side, her tone sugary but purposeful. "We can certainly arrange something," she said smoothly, directing her words not to Charlotte but to Alana, as if the matter was already settled. "Perhaps we can move you to 2C, Ms." She trailed off, not bothering to check the manifest. It's still first class, of course, and it might be more comfortable for everyone. Alana looked up from her notebook, meeting Tessa's gaze with a calm that made the air between them feel heavier. "Actually," she said, her voice even, "this is my seat. 1A. It was booked 3 weeks ago, confirmed in writing, and assigned at check-in. There is no mistake." Charlotte's smile faltered, then returned with an edge. "You must have gotten an upgrade," she said lightly, brushing an invisible thread off her sleeve. "These things happen." "But I've been sitting here for years." Tessa tried again, this time with a firmer tone wrapped in faux courtesy. "We'd really appreciate your flexibility," she said. "Ms. Whitman has seniority with the airline, and we want her to feel at home." It wasn't a request, it was a quiet command. A social cue layered with subtle pressure, meant to push someone like Alana into stepping aside gracefully, as if decorum demanded it. But Alana didn't flinch. She didn't protest or escalate. Instead, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer, pulled out her phone, and typed a single line of text with deliberate precision. "Activate immediate protocol review. Situation developing on Skylux 309. AB." She hit send. No further explanation, no raised voice. She placed the phone back into her lap and looked out the window, letting the silence do the heavy lifting. Tessa blinked, thrown off by the lack of resistance. Charlotte opened her mouth as if to press again, but something in Alana's composure made her pause. Around them, passengers who had been pretending to read or scroll on their tablets now exchanged uneasy glances. The cabin wasn't loud, but it was no longer calm. Something had shifted. Something none of them could name yet, but would soon feel. The cabin had grown still, too still. Whispers swirled just beneath the surface, passengers casting quick glances over the tops of their newspapers and tablet screens, unsure whether to intervene or stay invisible. Sensing the discomfort but misreading the cause, Tessa moved swiftly to escalate the matter, signaling for Bruce Myers, the flight service manager, to come forward. Bruce, a stocky man in his early 50s with a silver name tag and the air of someone who had spent too many years smoothing over VIP tantrums, approached with the confident gait of authority. "Good afternoon," he began, addressing Alana with the tone of someone trying to speak to a customer without actually listening. "I understand there's been some confusion. Ms. Whitman here is one of our longest-standing Platinum Plus members, and this seat has traditionally been reserved for her." The word "traditionally" hung awkwardly in the air, as if it could override policy. "Now," Bruce continued, gesturing toward a seat just a row behind, "we'd like to offer you 2C. It's just as spacious, and we'd be happy to add some extra accommodations for the inconvenience." His voice was courteous, his posture composed, but the message was the same: move. Smile. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Alana didn't blink. She reached slowly into the side pocket of her handbag and withdrew a sleek black card holder. With deliberate calm, she slid a single business card between her fingers and held it out to Bruce. "Before you go any further," she said, her voice low and steady, "you might want to take a look at this." Bruce took the card with casual indifference, but as his eyes scanned the bold letters at the top, "Alana Brooks, Executive Chairwoman, Nova Flight Holdings," his expression froze. He looked up, blinking once, then again, as if trying to make sense of what he had just read. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Tessa, watching from behind, stepped closer, peering over his shoulder to see what had derailed the conversation so abruptly. Her jaw tightened. Charlotte, however, remained blissfully unaware of the shift in atmosphere. "I don't see what the holdup is," she huffed, crossing her arms. "Just bump her to another seat already. I have work to do." But no one responded. The dynamic had changed in an instant. Bruce's hand trembled slightly as he handed the card back. "Ms. Brooks," he said, his voice now careful, "I wasn't aware—" "No, you weren't," Alana replied coolly, slipping the card back into her holder, "but now you are." So let's be clear, this is not just about a seat. It's about how you treat the people you assume have no power. Her gaze swept from Bruce to Tessa, then lingered briefly on Charlotte, who still looked confused. For the first time on that flight, no one seemed entirely sure who was in control. But Alana knew, and so did they. 10 minutes later, the hum of conversation in the cabin hushed as two sharply dressed men in navy suits boarded the aircraft through the front galley. Their presence was unmistakable, clean-cut, poised, and carrying digital tablets and ID badges clipped to their jackets with the Nova Flight Holdings logo in clear view. Without a word to the passengers, they made their way down the aisle, stopping just outside the first-class section. Bruce Myers and Tessa Lang, one of them announced calmly but firmly, scanning the cabin with professional detachment, "You are being asked to step off the aircraft immediately. We will be conducting an internal review of the incident that took place today." A ripple of confusion and tension spread among the seated passengers. Bruce, still trying to regain his footing after Alana's revelation, looked visibly shaken. Tessa stiffened, her jaw clenched, as she exchanged a panicked glance with Bruce. "This has to be a misunderstanding," she tried to reason, her voice cracking slightly. But the men didn't flinch. "This decision comes directly from executive command." The taller of the two replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We've been briefed. The review will begin the moment you disembark." As the two crew members reluctantly gathered their belongings under the unblinking gaze of the cabin, Charlotte shot up from her seat, clearly offended by the lack of attention. "Wait a minute," she interjected, her voice shrill. "I'm a loyal customer of this airline. I've flown first class for 15 years. Doesn't that count for something?" One of the Nova flight representatives turned to her without missing a beat. "Yes, ma'am," he said evenly. "It means you should know by now that loyalty never outweighs basic respect." Charlotte blinked in stunned silence, her protest dying before it could fully form. All the while, Alana remained seated in 1A, legs crossed, hands resting lightly on the leather notebook in her lap. She didn't smile, she didn't gloat, she simply observed. There was no satisfaction in watching people scramble, just a steady awareness that systems only change when someone refuses to be moved. A young man a few rows back leaned toward his travel companion and whispered, barely audible above the soft chime of the seatbelt signs. "I thought she was just a regular passenger," he said, eyes wide. "Guess not." His tone wasn't one of judgment, but awe. The kind that fills a room when status is redefined in real time. As Bruce and Tessa exited the aircraft under the quiet escort of the two executives, the mood shifted entirely. The balance of power had not just shifted, it had been reset. No more assumptions. No more appearances dictating authority. The woman in 1A hadn't raised her voice, but somehow she had spoken louder than anyone else on board. 15 minutes later, the cabin door closed with a quiet finality as Tessa and Bruce were escorted off the aircraft. Their departure met with hushed whispers and exchanged glances. But the tension hadn't fully cleared. Not yet. Charlotte Whitman, still seated in 3A, refused to let the moment pass. Her voice rang out again, louder this time, edged with disbelief and indignation. "This is absurd," she snapped, gesturing dramatically toward the aisle. "I've supported this airline for years, and this is how I'm treated. Just thrown aside." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The air was thick with the weight of what had just happened. Something had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Slowly, Alana turned her head toward Charlotte, her expression composed but unwavering. Her voice when she spoke was calm and controlled, but every word landed like a stone in still water. "The issue," she said quietly, "was never about who I am. It's about who you decided I couldn't be." The words hung in the air, silencing even Charlotte, whose lips parted in stunned disbelief. The cabin, once tense with uncertainty, now simmered with silent reckoning. A passenger across the aisle, phone in hand, had instinctively begun recording the exchange just moments before. The camera caught it all: Charlotte's outburst, Alana's measured response, and the quiet strength that filled the space in between. The clip, less than 30 seconds long, would be uploaded before the wheels left the ground, and within hours it would be trending across platforms. The caption beneath the video read, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." It resonated because it was true. Alana hadn't yelled, threatened, or demanded. She had simply stood her ground and forced an entire system to confront itself. As the aircraft began taxiing toward the runway, the usual bustle of safety announcements and luggage shifting returned, but with it came an unmistakable change in atmosphere. Passengers sat straighter, conversations were quieter. The hierarchy they had all walked on board with had been turned inside out. In seat 1A, Alana Brooks opened her notebook once more, flipping past the earlier pages filled with meeting notes and business strategy. She took out a pen and began to write. Thoughts not about the disruption, but about the policy overhaul she knew would need to follow. There was work to be done, and she intended to lead it. The plane lifted gently into the sky, the city lights shrinking below as dusk settled over the horizon. From her seat, Alana looked out the window, the reflection of her face faint against the glass. There was no need for triumph, no public speech. The message had already been delivered, clear, quiet, and unforgettable. And while the flight continued on to Dubai, the real destination had already been reached. A reckoning that demanded respect, not just for titles or appearances, but for basic human dignity. As Flight 309 touched down on the sunlit tarmac of Dubai International, the cabin filled with the familiar sounds of landing, the soft chime of seatbelt signs switching off, the rustle of passengers reaching for bags, and the hushed conversations about what had just transpired. But in the first-class cabin, all eyes remained subtly fixed on seat 1A. Alana Brooks stood, calmly collecting her notebook and blazer, her presence as grounded and composed as when she boarded. As she exited the aircraft, a private car waited at the bottom of the jet bridge, sleek, black, and bearing the Nova flight insignia. Her assistant, impeccably dressed, opened the door with a respectful nod. A young traveler nearby, phone in hand, couldn't help but ask as he captured a brief clip, "Do you have a message for people who've ever felt disrespected like that?" Alana paused, turned slightly, and with the faintest smile said, "I don't take flights to prove who I am. I take them to prove that fairness should never need permission." That simple, powerful quote would soon echo across social media, appended to the now viral footage of her exchange on board. But for Alana, this moment wasn't about going viral. It was about accountability and the future. Discrimination doesn't always arrive with loud insults or overt slurs. Often it hides in plain sight, in a look that lingers too long, a tone laced with quiet doubt, or a policy that quietly favors familiarity over fairness. What happened on Flight 309 was not a breakdown in protocol. It was a reflection of how everyday bias becomes normalized through repetition. Alana Brooks didn't demand respect by shouting or threatening anyone's job. She let truth and professionalism do the heavy lifting. Her quiet resolve exposed how institutions often function on assumption rather than equity. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about how systems respond when forced to choose between legacy privilege and evolving fairness. In that choice, the airline made a statement, not just to Charlotte Whitman or Bruce or Tessa, but to every passenger who's ever been made to feel out of place in a space they fully earned. Alana didn't just correct a moment of bias, she triggered a systemic re-evaluation of what the word VIP truly means. Because true prestige doesn't lie in status or titles, it lies in how we treat the people we assume hold none. If you believe that dignity shouldn't be negotiable and that respect isn't a privilege, it's a standard, then this story is for you. At X Daily Stories, we bring to light the quiet victories, the unspoken battles, and the moments of truth that challenge the systems we live in. Stories like Alana Brooks deserve to be heard not because they're loud, but because they matter. So if this message resonated with you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The more voices we amplify, the closer we get to a world where power isn't just claimed, but earned with integrity. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.